Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome to this week's episode of Steelers Touch Down Under. I'm Matty Peverell, joined as always by my co-host Marky Davison. Well, actually, you weren't here last week, but welcome back, missed ya. Good to have you back on the show. Today we are talking defense. This is not just because of the breaking news about the new Steelers senior defensive assistant and linebacker coach in Brian Flores. This also relates to the fact that we really, over this week, we're going to do defense. Next week, we're going to do offense. We really wanted to start ranking the Steelers' defensive units by position, and that will help define, where we think the team needs to go in terms of free agency in the draft. And then Mark and I get to wake up to the news about Brian Flores. So, Mark, how are you? And what did you think when you heard the news?
Well, as always, every time it happens, like I was, we've had news before with AB being moved, or the big one I had was a few years ago when James Harrison went to be a Patriot, and it was like 9 a.m. and I was like, no. So it's so funny for us being in Australia that we're 14 hours in front, but we're 6 hours behind in the news. So anytime these kind of things happen with Brian Flores or whoever gets hired or whatever, from about like the 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. window in America, we miss that because we're asleep. So we miss all the breaking news. That's why you guys had that special podcast from BTSC, from Dave, and I think Jeff did an excellent job there. But man, you know what's the bigger news besides this? We should talk about forever.
What is it?
The 0-3 is now my favorite number.
0-3. Why?
Yeah. The Bengals are 0-3, man. Super Bowls. I'm not. Look, I was away. Look, man, I'm so happy. I know you wanted the Bengals to win.
I don't want the Bengals to win. I don't want the Bengals.
There was some talk in the chat of you and me on the Facebook.
Mate, I had T. Higgins at a great margin to win, MVP, and I had Aaron Donald as well. That is absolute. What I can't understand about Super Bowl MVP is it's fan voted. Aaron Donald won them that game. Cooper Kupp had the touchdowns, but if Aaron Donald didn't turn it on at the end, so don't bring it up. I'm a bit dirty about the MVP.
Cooper Kupp had like an average receiver game, really. He had 2 touchdowns, but he only about 90 yards. He didn't go off. He didn't have like 170 yards. No. He didn't do anything overly spectacular. He maybe got a few first downs, but Aaron Donald won in that game. But I'm so happy. The Bengals have still never won a Super Bowl, and it warms my heart, and I can't wait to face them yet again. And I am super excited. Back to the news, though, with Brian Flores, too. I think, like, from my outside opinion, and there's a lot of legal stuff going on and racial stuff, too. I'm not going to jump into that. But basically, in my view, the guy's a head coach. Like, last year, what he did with the Dolphins, they were 1 game away from the playoffs. And I don't have no idea why Miami said, okay, you weren't good enough, but you lost a few games in a row, like 6, and then you won 7 and lost 1. But he won 8 games out of 9. It had a chance to go to the playoffs, and then they go and fire him. And now we've picked him up as our linebackers coach and our assistant, I think he is, defensive assistant. So
senior defensive assistant.
Yeah, it's going to help us out. Like, it's a pretty good hire. And if this doesn't, like, motivate the players to go out there and win a championship or go out and win a playoff game. Yeah, like, we're getting into territory now. If we start to lose with all these great hires and the players we have like TJ, Minka, and we'll get through them today. What are we? Just a good team on paper. Is that all we are? Like, we have to do something. We need to start winning games.
All right, so I got 3 questions for you on the Brian Flores thing. Hire, I should say, not necessarily thing. All right, so first one. Do you think there's any issues there with Minka Fitzpatrick?
Nah, I don't overly think so. Okay, look, yes, he did get traded from when he was the defensive coordinator, or no, when he was the coach of Miami, right? Was that right?
Yep.
I don't overly think so, to be honest. Like, I put it down to, we could make speculation. There could be some really problems. But at the end of the day, if you and I had problems in a previous job and I walked in, I would sort it out with you in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And say, mate, here's a coffee. Let's get over it. Let's move on. We got a common goal. That's it. The common goal for the Steelers now is to go win championships. Minka's not going to be stressing out there. I used to be a Dolphin. He used to be a Dolphin, and we didn't get along or whatever. That is all nonsense. It doesn't need to be there. The fact is that Flores is coming in and getting another chance while he's also, I guess, doing the stuff with the NFL and going against them, and that's fine. You do that. But when you come in to be a Pittsburgh Steeler, and we wish you all the luck, we have to give them praise and we have to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? Who was the other one, while we're on the topic of coaches, who was the other coach that, the offensive line coach, who was that, the new hire that we had?
Pat Mayer.
Right. As soon as I saw that he was hired, a lot of Steeler fans were like, oh, no, come on. Give the guy a chance. Like, for both coaches, let them go into the office, sit down, have a coffee. And I'm sorry if I'm ranting, but it really riles me up. Let them have a coffee, sit down and make a plan. It's February, okay? It is not June yet. It is not July. It's not even preseason football.
But you know what I can't...
bad coach.
Yeah, I just want to feed off what you're saying there. You heard all the crap from Steelers fans around, Mike Tomlin calls the defense, right? So half of the fan base is happy to go, why is the head coach calling the defense? And then you make a positional hire as a coach, and then you're like, okay, this guy's crap. The whole offense is going to be crap. Or they make a defensive hire. This guy's crap. They're all going to be crap. Hang on. You can't sit here on Monday and get, let's just, hypothetically, on a Monday and get cranky that Tomlin calls the plays and they hire a positional coach on the Tuesday and you go, well, this guy's going to be, the Steelers offense is going to be terrible. The Steelers defense is going to be terrible, because they hired this coach. But hang on, didn't on Monday you say that Tomlin calls the plays? So if Tomlin calls the plays, isn't it Tomlin's fault? And then another coach gets hired on Wednesday and they're like, this guy's going to ruin the Steelers. Well, who's ruining the Steelers? Is it this person? Visually, is it person A on Monday, or is it person B on Tuesday, or is it person C on Wednesday? Because right now, the whole thing's being torn down in flames, and I don't understand. Right? So I agree with you. This hyperbole around this guy's going to have this massive impact. Well, if you don't think the coach was a good hire, is he going to have an impact? Maybe not.
The happiest bloke right now is probably Matt Canada because everything's been shifted away from him and he's terrible
right.
And he's terrible offense. Like no one's talking about Matt Canada's offense anymore. It's all about we had the new hire and it's fantastic. Like bring the new guy in and we should be happy for him. But this is probably the first time I've seen on the Facebook comments and Twitter that people are actually happy and we're giving the guy a shot. And we have he's meant to be a head coach for any other team, and we're all in unison to be happy for our team. And a lot of these news articles come out, like I said, February, March, and they haven't done anything yet. Like, just let them get there. I know we need to talk about it. I understand that the media concept of that, but everyone, put a lot of blame on Pat Myers straight away and said he was a really bad coach.
I found the funniest thing about the Pat Meyer, just going off topic. He looks a bit like Urban Meyer, but they're not related.
Not related.
I spent ages trying to Google if these guys are related.
Yeah,
it's quite funny. I mean, Mark Tobin brings up that the O-line, this O-line hire is a joke. I sit there, I'm like, I think Clem that was a joke. Like Clem left halfway through the season. And the O-line's one where you can have the best coach in the world, but if you don't have the right players to fit the scheme, well, it's just not working. And the thing for me is that Pat, the new O-line coach Mayer, did some work with outside zone. I think the Steelers need to be doing some outside zone stuff. I think they've got they need to draft in those linemen. They've got linemen that fit that. I think that's the way to, really, unless you're going to have the best defensive line in the league, it's very hard to interior rush in the NFL now with the interior pressure. I've been listening to so much about the draft as I always do, right? And this week on one of the NFL Network podcasts I listened to, they're talking about this infatuation that's amongst the NFL with interior rushers and how that affects where people draft or how much people are making more in those positions. And the reason I bring that up is if that's where the league is right now, do you want to run? Are you going to run head on into some of the league's best rushers? Maybe if you've got Najee, but you need the O-lineman to do it. So I just, Mark brings up, in the chat, Mark Tobin brings up the interim guy. Well, the Steelers played around with that. And, he went off to the, where'd he end up? Did he go to Chicago? I think he ended up at Chicago.
I'm not sure, but
everyone wanted Munchak. Munchak, I've heard, is actually rumored to potentially be talking to the Dolphins, but Munchak might not want to do anything. Munchak's old. Munchak left the Steelers. He left the Steelers yesterday with his family. He might have left for other reasons as well. And remember at the time there being some rumors about, some, other things going on. So regardless, I want to talk about the Steelers. I want to talk about, the defense. I want to get back to Flores. So we talked about that with Minka. I agree with you. I also think Minka's had a few years in the league now. Minka's a bit more mature. So I think, and it's not like he's the positional coach for Minka who's going to be Brian Flores. I think we're fine. Second one I wanted to ask you, Mark, do you have concerns that this is a temporary move, like that Brian Flores will move on really, really quickly? Or do you think he's here to stay, at least for a couple of seasons?
He could, because that's what the NFL is all about, right? You need to do it. Kind of depends too what happens with his NFL case as well. But I see him, no matter what, if he's a Steeler this year, and I think he's linebackers coach or assistant, he's there to do a job and help us to win championships. Now, like, there is talks that maybe he might become defensive coordinator once if Terrellson can't, up to scratch, right? But we've all been, look, you can be a head coach like Tomlin is, but you need a good party as well. All right. Like we are on the Behind the Steel Curtain, right? We have many podcasters. We have maybe Jeff, Brian and Dave are like the leaders of our team. We all do individual things that are, quite awesome in my opinion. Right. So Brian could get picked up in the next 2 years by another team. And I would be like, oh, thanks, mate, for coming in. As long as he can make an impact this year in 2022, and we have to start doing something with our defense. It is becoming a bit of a joke, and we've been talking about this the last 2 years. Something is missing. We have all the players there, but we're just not quite getting it done. And why are we not getting it done? Because I'm buying I'm watching the games, and we are losing in the playoffs by a lot of points, and we aren't getting anywhere. But we have Cameron Heyward, and I love the guy so much. Yet again, year 12, I'm ready for this. Are you? Are you ready for this? You've been saying that for 12 years. Nothing against him. Like, I'm just saying, there's a certain point in time you have to go out there, and we need to see the defense on the field that we were used to seeing back in 2008 and 10s, and when it started to try and fall away. And even when Shazier went down, a lot of things changed, right? Devin Bush was meant to be that guy, and now he will get injured. And then who's next to him? We brought in Schobert, right? Schobert was meant to be the cover guy. Didn't really do anything. I looked at the turnover ratio for the whole season. We're at +2. That's terrible. That's bad. Like,
you're not going to go far in the playoffs. And it's funny. I listened to a podcast. I'm just going to call it out. Like, Young Jeremiah, Bucky Brooks, right? They talked about this during the wild card round, and they talked about which teams in the playoffs were in the playoffs. And they specifically focused on turnover ratio, and we were like the lowest team on that ratio. And most of the teams were in if you're in the playoffs, out of the 14 teams, all of them had really, really, like, the top teams had the top turnover ratios. Like, and that's the reality. Like, you're not going to go far if you don't have that. So, and +2 is not very much. I don't know what that ranked up in terms of the overall NFL with the +2. I'd have to pull that up while we're talking, but that's an issue. The other thing that I like about this hire, and you alluded to it in what you were saying there, Mark, is the fact that Brian Flores was a head coach. He's not coming in as our defensive coordinator, but he understands, I talk about complementary football a lot, but there's complementary football on the defense as well. And we've talked about that. We talked about that with Shannon. I talked about it with Rich. You and I have talked about it, in the last 6 weeks, where, what happens on the defensive line flows into the linebackers, flows into the secondary, and vice versa. What the secondary do flows into what the linebackers do, flows into what the defensive line does. And so the thing that I like about Brian Flores is Terrell Austin has this background, obviously, with defensive backs. Tomlin does too, but Tomlin's been calling the defense. Tomlin's been, overseeing great defense the whole time he's been in Pittsburgh, regardless of whether the Cow or Tomlin players. I don't care about all that crap. But now you get bringing Brian Flores to be defensive assistant. You've got someone, and it's been a big. I was talked about it a lot with Rich after we did the touchdown. He did the touchdown under show with me about a month ago. Mark, he and I talked for ages around the fact that Tomlin and Dave ended up joining the discussion too. The fact that Tomlin doesn't have enough people around him that challenge him. There's a lot of yes people, and that was a big question for us with like Butler, right? In terms of he just says yes, yes, yes. who are they going to bring in as DC? They promote someone with Terrell Austin. He still doesn't have someone going back to him and going, how about you do this instead? I love the Flores thing because Flores might be a bit more inclined to do that. They wouldn't have brought Flores in unless they were open to that. And as I was trying to start this point out with, Flores understands the importance of cohesion between the defense. I'm really happy. I'm really happy with this hire for those two reasons.
Well, that's the question I was going to ask you about being the challenge, right? Do you think that Flores can, take the lower role, the under role? He's been a head coach now. Can he step down a few notches, or is he going to be like? You don't want to, with Mike Tomlin, he's the head coach and he's the final decision, right? Do you think Flores will be okay just working on his craft with linebackers and assimilating to his role, or do you think that I guess because he did take the position, right? Or do you think he might?
I'll give you three. Yeah, so I'll give you three lenses at it, right? One lens is that the optics. Brian Flores can't sit there and sue the NFL, right, about head coaching jobs and all the rest of it. It becomes very difficult if he gets offered a job by a team like this and says no. Now, he could say, look, this job's beneath me, blah, blah, blah. But if the Steelers, like a team like the Steelers, who came up with the Rooney Rule, who have, I don't want to get into the race stuff, but they technically have, African-American head coach, obviously, in Tomlin, African-American defensive coordinator in Austin, African-American coach in of descent in, and hopefully I'm saying this however politically wants it to be said, but in Kyle Dunbar as well, right? You look at what they've got, right? You got the team that invented the Rooney Rule. You got Mike Tomlin, who's, such a big fan of promoting, young coaches and developing young coaches and what have you as well. I just think that from Brian Flores' perspective, you can't go and sue, you can go and sue the NFL with all these things, but it makes it a lot harder if you don't accept the job, right? And so I think this is a good example. It actually backs up his case. Number one, it puts him in a good light. Number two, it says, hey, a team thinks that I'm worth it. Why aren't these other teams? Why am I being passed up from it? Secondly, obviously, Dave and Jeff talked about on their show earlier, the breaking news one around you get draft picks with Flores. But I also think Flores, this case is not going to be resolved in 12 months. This is going to be a multi-year thing, this lawsuit. So that's kind of good for the Steelers because it makes a big difference if he can do that while he's a coach, right? The other thing it does for Flores too is even if it ends up being a settlement, it gives him something on his coaching resume where he's not out of the game. So that's one lens. The second lens is, well, it actually helps Terrell Austin, who's never been a defensive coordinator before, right? So it actually takes the pressure off him. And I think it allows him to do what he needs to do without them having to bring in a secondary coach. I like that part. The other out there lens, I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not saying I believe it or anything like it. But Tomlin wants to work with a veteran quarterback. They could still make a move, right? We're all sitting there hoping they don't and they just get better, in loads of positions. But if they made a move and Tomlin gave it a couple of seasons and maybe went, nah, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not saying this is what I want and I think some language from Tomlin suggests he's open to helping to rebuild around a rookie quarterback in the next couple of years, even though everyone thinks he doesn't want to work with one. But let's say he doesn't, and let's say they do go out and get a veteran to win now. Well, is Brian Flores, is this a way to get him into the organization to be the next Steelers head coach? I'm not saying it's very unlikely, right? It's very unlikely, but you just never know. And to me, they can't get worse out of this. So that's why it's a win.
No, yeah. I agree with you 100%. I think bringing the guy in who was a head coach, give him a chance. He's doing that stuff with the NFL, sure. Hopefully, look, as a Steeler fan and a football fan, we understand what, he's going through and that you do that, mate. That's what you need to take care of. Hopefully we don't get reminded all the time during the season, though. They're going to always bring it up that he's going to be fighting with the NFL.
So this is what I want. This was the question I wanted to ask you. The last one was, do you think this becomes a distraction? Because the Pittsburgh Steelers don't like distractions.
Yes, it will. It's the NFL. Let's be honest, mate. It's big news, and if we start winning games or losing games, they're going to tie it back to that lawsuit every single time. They do it. How many times do you see when Tom Brady's in the Super Bowl, they always pan to him and they just bring up some ridiculous stat. The NFL, loves the narrative behind that. no matter what. Yeah. So it's going to create news every time. And they straight away did it with the Big Ben stuff 2 days after. They threw him under the bus. It never leaves you. So like for what he's going through, if he believes in his word, then go all for it. Same time, he's trying to, play coach football. Even look at stuff like, James Conner. He can never shake the cancer thing. And he even told them, I get it. I beat cancer and I thank you for that. But I'm a football player. I need to move on, right? But the NFL, no, it's going to be a distraction, mate, 110%. There's no doubt about it. Every time it comes up, or if he wins the game or loses the game, or, if he, I don't know, wears a hat backwards or wears a hat forward, it'll be something.
Mate, we know what the answer's going to be, though. Like Mike Tomlin will get asked about it. We do not care. Like that's going to be the response. Like it really doesn't matter.
And look, this is why we like Tomlin too, because he's had sometimes I don't even watch some of Tomlin's conferences because they are all the same, but they're very like you put them in the background. It's like the soothing noise, he just knows how to talk to the media. It will be a distraction, but what if we win? It won't matter, and we got to start winning. That's the
other thing. Like you look at the teams that have won Super Bowl after Super Bowl. Like you look at the Patriots, for example, like, and he was on their staff, but they had like Josh McDaniels, who could be will be a pretty decent head coach. I know it didn't really work with Denver, but it will work. Like it's much more likely to work here with the Raiders. They won. They had great coaches. You look at the Steelers when we've won, like Bruce Arians, like yes, he put Ben out to basically on an island to get his head lopped off. In many ways. But like they had Ken Wisenhunt. He went on to, coach Arizona and, did a lot with the Chargers. Like, there's heaps of coaches we can sit here and name. But like, it's not like the Steelers. It's not like, the Steelers have had instances where the really good assistant coaches and coordinators help them out. They go elsewhere, and they're head coach worthy. The same thing goes to several other teams over the last, 20, 30 years that like win multiple Super Bowls. They've got coordinators and coaches that get picked up by other teams. We've had the reverse where we've had a coach that's had a winning, almost a winning record in the NFL, but's turned around an awful Miami Dolphins team. I think it's really great. And look, we are well into this show and we want to talk about the Steelers position. So I'm not going to go through the stats, but when you do look at the Brian Flores coach teams across most of the statistical categories, he's in the top half of the league year in, year out, whether that was with Miami or whether that was with New England in the last 2 seasons there that I looked at as linebacker coach with him. So, as I say, like there's going to be a real benefit that I do think that he brings to the Steelers this year. But let's go rewind a little bit and let's go to 2021. So Mark and I are going to go through each position. So offensive, like these are the different positions we're going to have. Defensive end, we're going to look at safety, we're going to look at cornerback, inside linebacker, defensive tackle, and outside linebacker. So, Mark, I'm going to feed off. I'm going to ask you the different positions, and we'll talk about that position, obviously, one by one. Who did you have as the worst positional group in the Steelers in 2021?
Man, it's got to be middle linebacker.
Really? Okay, so we're immediately we're different. Okay, you go. Tell me why.
I just miss the thump. I just miss them hitting people as hard as they can, and I was sick of seeing Minka come down to the box and get the tackle. I know how football works, right? It's also the defensive line letting him through and that kind of stuff, but Devin Bush wasn't ready. What he was going to be, right? He went down. Spillane to me is just a guy, but we need a guy like him to sometimes be in there in that role. Marcus Allen filled in as well. Didn't really do too many things. Like no big splash plays really happened there. I think we missed the guy at the very start of the season. I'll keep saying it. Vince Williams retiring.
Yep.
The few days before was like, oh, okay, we missed that. We missed him there. I just think it was hard to watch sometimes, as what I've seen over the last few years of the Steelers with Shazier, even back in the days, Larry Foote and Farrier, like, man, some of those defenses are so fun to watch with those fellas working in the middle. And I think we got picked on. I think we got picked on a lot with Devin Bush, and there was plays. And there's also a lot of commitment. There was times I just didn't see Schobert want to tackle.
Yeah.
I just like get in there and just tackle someone, like be part of the group. Look, I know that you might have the counter argument with maybe the defensive line letting him through, but for Minka to come down to the box every single time and lead tackles, the middle of the field was a big problem for me.
Okay. All right, look, I disagree. I don't disagree a lot of what you said there. To me, the inside linebackers were the second worst group. Okay. So, and the only reason they weren't the worst is because actually when I went through the stats, they weren't as bad as what I thought they might have been. And that kind of feeds into the defensive line stuff you mentioned there. A more defensive tackle, which probably gives people a sense of where I'm going to go next. But the year-on-year difference between what we did this year versus what we did last year wasn't bad enough for them to be the worst ranked position for me, right? So that's why they're not, like, it was close. It was really hard. But for me, without a doubt, it's definitely cornerback was the worst position of
really.
Steelers. Yeah, and to me, it's a number one need. I think I've talked about, I think you fill this in rounds 3, 4, or 5 and get someone fast in the draft. But I think you need, if you want to get better here, you are going to have to get someone in free agency. But I'll give you some stats, right? So in 2020, the Steelers averaged 6.8 yards per target. Now, I'm not saying per completion, because obviously if you complete a pass, you go for yards. If you don't if you don't complete a pass, it's no yards, right? So it's actually, that's misleading when you look at that stat. So 6.8 yards per target in 2020, 3,494 yards allowed, 56.7% of passes allowed, 22 TDs, a quarterback rating of 76.7, and air yards of 2,088, right? So that's 2020. In 2021, the average was 7.2 yards per target, 3,977 yards, 63.1% completion. That's almost 10% increase. 24 TDs allowed. So they only allowed 2 more. But 12 of those 24 TDs came from cornerbacks, 15 TDs if you count Mollett and Norwood, what they allowed. A quarterback rating allowed of 88.7 and 2,228 yards in the air. They got worse everywhere across the board this year. And it's cornerbacks, right? And 5 out of the top 9 people, worst players on Steelers defense for allowing quarterback rating, like the highest quarterback rating, were cornerbacks, and even more if you allow Mollett. It doesn't get any worse than that. And the other thing that I had to factor in was the amount of targets that Devin Bush and Schobert had to defend against versus what the cornerbacks did. If anyone sits here this offseason and talks about James Pierre to me, I swear I will I'll have to leave the room, because James Pierre, when I look at some of these stats, is awful, right? Akello Witherspoon, when you look at it, there's a couple of statistical lines he wasn't great at, like his completion. I think it was completion rate. I'll have to pull it up now. But Akello Witherspoon was by far the best cornerback on this team, and he hardly played. And it's not just the interceptions. They were abysmal. It was absolutely awful. It was so bad. I just don't even know where to begin.
When you say it like that, it sounds bad.
And Cameron Sutton was bad too. Cameron Sutton was real bad. He was targeted. You got to find someone there on the outside. Get better. It's not good enough.
Yeah, I hear you. And we have the pass rush too, right? That's what the hard thing is. We need some shutdown corners or something, because we have the pass rush. I think, all the years people are saying we're wasting talent. We are wasting talent. I agree.
You may as well sorry, I'm holding this stat book. You may as well hold them. Get done for DPI and then hope you can crash them and make it settle for field goals.
Yeah, it could be a lesser yardage, right?
100%. That's where it's going. 7.2 yards. That's where we're going. When you look at depth of target as well, it's awful.
What we should do is just tire them out by holding them all the time and making them churn their legs over. And if they get tired, they won't run as hard anymore. Look, it makes sense.
You may as well get someone dirty out there. I'm obviously not a fan. I obviously don't want this to happen. But like, get ejected by knocking someone out. Like I don't know, but like right now, it's like I don't want to say it can't be worse because it can, but it's just really disappointing. Like they're letting the team down. Like I just can't even.
All right, transition. We're gonna calm down a little bit. Transition. Big Brosco says, why doesn't the dog sound Aussie? That's a good question. That's a very good question.
I don't know. It's the outside dog that's going nuts. Anyway, mine's been good.
Yeah, man. I hear you. We haven't got a secondary. We haven't got a lot of things. I'm starting to find, everyone's saying we need to get a quarterback. Man, we could spend 3 hours talking about how many different things this team needs right now. And it starts with bringing in Flores and Austin and those guys, the defensive coordinator. It is very funny to what we are seeing, the transitional period of being a new team. And we have TJ winning Defensive Player of the Year, but we can't do anything.
All right.
That's the most disappointing part.
Where did you have cornerback ranked in terms of your position units?
Well, how many units
starting from the bottom? Well,
how many units we doing?
6.
Well, look, I can't.
Especially after I told you all the stats.
I can't go against what you said, so probably like 5th, right?
Okay, so you're going then 5th.
The only person that I like on the secondary is we're a funny team right now because we have Joe Hayden, and I think he's a key piece, but he needs things around. He needs younger players around him, young, feisty, angry players around him, right? And we have Minka, but we didn't use Minka the way that we had used him before in previous years. Minka was just the extra linebacker coming down the box, right? We didn't get. I don't know about you, but I don't think we got burnt too many times with over 50-yard footballs. But I think
the only reason we didn't get burnt though was because teams could just run it up the middle. They didn't have to throw.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I can't even take any solace in that. Like that's like okay, like.
And that's it, right? We weren't getting burnt like going deep as often as I see. However, there were guys like sometimes Trey Norwood was on like their first best receiver every single time and getting burnt. Cameron Sutton was getting burnt, and then also our secondary, if you include sometimes the middle linebackers too, they were getting burnt quite a lot. There was times where I would watch the offense on Big Ben play, and we'd go 3 and out, or we'd go 3rd and 7, and we walk off the field, and then you watch the other team come on, and they would just go 45 yards in 3 minutes, and you're like, well, and get a TD. Like
that Raiders game. That Raiders game is a perfect example of that. That Raiders game is a perfect.
Everybody was open. Like everyone was like open. Like it didn't matter who was getting the football.
But do you really want to keep Hayden? Like, don't get me wrong. I would like to. I think if they do the whole Deshae Townsend thing, yeah, cool. But like Joe Hayden, right? If you go in his time with the Steelers, right? First year allowed, obviously, he was a very different player in 2018, but allowed 50.5% completion. 2019, 53.7%. 2020, 50.6%. Last year, he allowed 60%. He allowed his least number of yardage, which was interesting, but he played his least amount of games. And it's basically the difference there is like, 100 to 200 yards. So if you get burned a couple of plays, it's the difference there. He went from allowing a low of 5.5 yards per target in 2018 to 7.1 in 2020, 7.2 in 2021. He allowed his equal least amount of touchdowns, but again, it's a different position, that he was sort of playing on the Steelers team and he missed a lot of games. He allowed his quarterback rating allowed in his first year with the Steelers was 72. Second year was 66.5. 2020 was 75.9. And last year was 100.1. And he missed 17% of his tackles, which was a 3% increase. So 25% increase on his previous worst year.
Matty, you're the kind of the manager guy that I feel like I had a good day at work, and then you just tell me all these stats and I had a horrible day.
They're not productive. That's what I would say to you. You might have had a good day, but you weren't productive. You might have had a fun year on the team. You might have had a good time with the boys. A couple of away games you really liked.
I know you're bringing it back to reality, and I kind of don't like that because I like what I saw on the field with Joe. I'm like, he's a legend. He's a great player. He's one of the best we have. And then you just go through all these stats and like, oh no, maybe not. He's not a great player.
hit the
Like
road.
I hope we keep him. I hope we keep him there to be cornerback number one. We need to build around that. I don't think Arthur Millet's the guy. I like to see Trey Norwood like step up and do some more things. However, at the same time, I don't want to see him in there all the time. You know.
Yeah, you got to use it strategically. I'm not saying that Hayden's the reason why this defense is bad. I'm just saying that even the shining light in with the spoon and Hayden is.
Even to that extent, right? Our second cornerback is Akila Witherspoon, and where would he rank in the NFL? Like maybe 50 or something like that, 55.
I'd have to
like he but even to your personal opinion, right? Where would he rank? He wouldn't rank up the top.
You mean top? It was certainly not top 30 cornerback in this. Like it's hard because you're looking at a season when he was injured, and you're looking at like.
Yeah, but
he would be top. He would be top 50 because like in a pinch, but like
he's not a big name though, is he? That's what I'm trying to say. He's not a big name.
No. If he thinks he's going to get more than $2 million or more than, I don't think he's worth more than 6. To be honest, I wouldn't pay him more than 6. I just wouldn't. Unless you're doing a multi-year deal and you're doing some voidable years, like I just don't know why you would.
Do you have stats for every single position? Because you're going to rip them all to shreds.
I have some, but it's probably. Actually, I didn't get to finish. Sorry, I actually didn't get to finish. The other thing that was interesting across the defense with these guys was that this year we had 80 pass defenses in 17 games. Last year we had 84 pass defenses. Now that's not just on the cornerback position, but obviously those guys are going to have the majority of pass defenses. And the other one that I wanted to look at was actually no, that's a stat for it. That's a different time. That's fine. So who was your third worst positional group?
So I guess number 4, right?
Number 4.
Yeah. Okay. Are we splitting defensive?
Yeah.
Tackle
yeah.
or the
yeah.
We are splitting, so we're splitting the tackle and the ends.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then you got to go with tackle, mate. You have to.
That's where I had him. That's exactly where I had him.
Yeah. If you're going tackle, it all comes down to like we all said throughout the year. They didn't have a plan for Alualu at all, and it showed every single game. It's like,
yeah.
I'm just gonna. Oh, you go, mate.
Yeah,
you go.
No. All I'm gonna say is, I'm just gonna say like. The only reason they're not worse is because of the injuries with Tuitt and Alualu, right? Like that's their only saving grace, and it was a struggle to not even put inside linebacker ahead of them. They weren't.
Well, you look at the guys who we had filling in, right? We had Mondo and Montravius Adams at nose tackle. You know, did their best, right?
Yeah.
Even to the certain extent, though, every single week the same things came out where. Cameron Heyward was almost feeling like he knew that this team was bad, but he didn't want to say it, but he wanted to give the guys props. Like he knew that they weren't doing a very good job, but he knew their ceiling, right? Mondo and Montravius Adams played okay, but they're not great. They're not fantastic. So, and that all came down to what can Cameron Heyward do to try and help that defensive line, and no Tuitt on the other side as well. Then you just have TJ on the island. So there's just so many different players all over the shop that, you know, TJ's 100,000% the best player, but then we have like an average line, and then we have Cameron Heyward too. So you can't they let up 140 yards a game.
Well, and so this is the thing. It's like the saving grace is that inside linebacker, you know, had such a detrimental performance. Cornerback was worse. And the other thing is, apart from the rush yards, it's very hard to judge the defensive tackle from a statistical perspective. So it's hard for me to rank them below those two. But what we saw on tape wasn't great. So that's where they are. Look, we all know the defensive tackle position interior defensive line needs to get better. I'm going to park it there. We're going to move on. I want to talk about the other positions. Who did you have as, let's change your attitude a little bit, the third best positional unit on the Steelers defense?
I'm going to go with the guys I've been talking about already. It was probably safety. Now, I'm also going to include...
I completely agree with you. This is exactly where I had them.
I'm going to include the guys like Trey Norwood in there too, like playing that certain role, like in the nickels and the you know, other formations like that. But Minka was playing his heart out all year. There are so many tackles he made. I think there was... I don't know if it was the Chiefs game or the Browns game. I think it was the Browns game where he tackled, was it Landry outside? He came over and knocked the football out and it could have been a first down. He was, like you said, the saving grace for this team. He made all the tackles.
What about that? He got the Steelers into the playoffs with the hit on Hollywood Brown in the Ravens game.
Was that the one? Was that the one where he's going outside?
Yeah. And he smacked it.
Yeah. That's the one.
He had made that tackle. They're not in the playoffs.
Yeah. So, and even to like a certain extent, I think Terrell Edmonds played really well as a safety as well. Like they didn't, and it was pretty much for the whole year, right? Those two were back there, right? And they're a good tandem.
This was the hard thing. It was hard not to put them ahead of who I had in at number 2 because they were so good. But it's the drop off after Minka and Terrell, and it's also Minka wasn't doing the free roaming role that he usually gets to do. Like, well, I felt bad putting them at third best. I wanted to put them at second best, but
look who we have. Yeah. Okay, look who we have. No offense to these fellas, Trey Norwood and Miles Killebrew are behind Minka and Terrell.
Yeah,
right. Now, they didn't really play too much. You saw Killebrew in there, like in some certain formations, like third down and whatever. But I don't know if you can find the stat, but like the high percentage snaps would have went to Minka and Edmonds because they were the backbone of the defense. And it's just unfortunate. It's very unfortunate the way how our defense was getting burnt so much because they had to make up for a lot of mistakes. Now, imagine if they didn't have to make up for so many mistakes and they could actually roam the field. And I like the play of Edmonds too, how he comes down into the box and provides that menacing hit too.
I have their snap counts if you want.
And let me guess, is it 95% each?
More.
No, 100%?
Minka's 99%, and Terrell's 98%.
Far out. There you go. That's exactly that's our point in a nutshell.
Mate, I'm talking 1,083 snaps for Minka and 1,145 for Terrell Edmonds.
That is amazing. And look, they were
I don't know how that works though. How does Terrell play more snaps in a smaller percentage? I don't know how that works.
I don't know.
Anyway,
that's look, those fellas at the back were just playing clean up football, weren't they? Playing clean up football, and you like they said they got busted through the middle how many times? How many times did we see like a 10-yard run, 11, 15-yard run, and we're like, far out. And then Minka's there, or Minka would make a cut, and he would see the play develop before anyone else. Sure as heck that Schobert wasn't getting in there. It's funny, man. When you break the defense down, it's a funny way to look at things like this.
That's what I mean, because I just think it's and the reason I want to talk about that was safety. I'm conscious we're going to start running out of time, but the thing for me is I talked about in War Room. I've talked about it on a few of the other shows. I think, a lot of some of the other BTSC guys, and George Chester says out for COVID. That's why, But we've talked about the need to retain Terrell because there's not many, unless you're going to draft someone really high and they're not going to be as good as Terrell. Like there's not a good, strong safety out there. I'm a big fan of Keanu Neal, but I know he's moved into a linebacker spot. He's on contract anyway with the Cowboys, I think it is. So, and Landon Collins, I don't know why you'd go older. Terrell knows the system. Terrell knows, Austin. Terrell's got better with Austin. Jeffrey Benedict's pointed that out numerous times. Minka and Terrell have a good chemistry. You got to re-sign Terrell, right? He's got to be re-signed. All right. So who did you have as your second best position in the positional unit rankings for defense?
Well, it has to be. This comes down to really just a player, and even my first best would just be the player. Has to be defensive end because we
agree.
Mate, Cameron Heyward's the leader of the
100%.
team. Well, like I said,
and I know actually we should pause. I just want to pause for everyone out there. I know statistically in some stats he's listed as a defensive tackle, but for the purposes of this, defensive end. Anyway, continue.
Look, he's the best one of the best players on the team, if not the leader. And it's starting to get to the point where in any workplace, in any office, any football team, you start to know how good a value you are to the team, and you can't do it all. Did he get a pick this year? I think he got a pick this year, didn't he?
Yeah.
Was it this year? Yeah. He got a pick.
His second career pick. Two picks in 2 years.
I've seen this guy take out a tackle and a guard.
I think actually, Michael Beck might have put this on Twitter, or maybe it's someone else. That there were 3 weeks or 4 weeks of the season where he had a bunch of pass defenses in the interception. He was the Steelers' best shutdown pass defender. It's pretty crazy.
Shut down defensive end.
Yeah, like he allowed one completion on 3 targets this year for 7 yards, and allowed a quarterback rating when passed to him of 2.8.
That's it. And who else do we have on the other side? It was like Chris Wormley, right? I think.
But this is why they were ranked like number 2 for me, because Wormley had a pretty good year for what most people think is a 3rd or 4th string guy. Wormley had like 7 sacks. Wormley had a good year.
Yeah, and also I think Loudermilk played some good snaps too within the organization, but they just need to build and get bigger, and they have to stop the run. So as good as Cameron Heyward is, allowing that many yards, 140 yards per game, and you can see in his expression that he knows that his team can be good, and he's trying his hardest to be one of the best Steelers, and TJ knows it too. But something needs to change, and we need to get some draft some guys in there, or the Taco Charltons, if they stick around, those kind of blokes. You can't just go to work and go, oh, TJ and this guy will do it. I'll just clean up the mess or whatever.
Well, Cam Heyward only missed 5.3% of tackles, which I think is ridiculous at what he's doing. Played 955 defensive snaps, a career, his second highest in his career. The last time he played more than that was in 2015 when he was 26, not 32. I mean, they got to help him out. Like, go get Hicks if Tuitt's gone, or go. You got to get someone to help him out. He can't be doing this. We want him to play another 3 or 4 seasons and get into a Super Bowl. You got to help him out there. And I do apologize to listeners. My dog is eating a very loud bone in the corner, so I apologize if that's coming through.
They were going through also. They were running away from Heyward too, right? You run away from Heyward and you double TJ. That's what they're really doing. And we still, there are big things that I think are happening with this Steelers franchise, but we are missing so many key pieces. Like, we still have the development. I think we all know who our number one's going to be. Development of like Alex Highsmith into his 3rd year. I just want them to all. They're not playing as a unit, right? I will always bring it back until we win another Super Bowl. I'll bring it back to 2004, 2005, 2008. Those defenses were so fun to watch, Matty.
Oh, I know.
I watch them every probably 2 months. I put some highlights on, and they're all a team. They're all a unit. They're all have one mindset, is to get after the football. And we used to be like the number 1 defense, and couldn't allow any yards. And now where are we? We're a good team. We're a good team, but we just, man, it's hard to watch. I can't do it this year again. I cannot do it this year again if we're playing. I know it's going to be a tough year with who our quarterback might be, but this year in the NFL with the Steelers, are we just going to allow them to run down every drive, and we can't let TJ rest, and the quarterbacks can't do anything? It's going to be hard, Matty. This year, watching the football was like the roller coaster every game.
Well, so before we get to the top position, I have some overall defensive stats that I wanted to hit you with at the end, but I think it's important when we talk about, obviously, outside linebacker is our consensus number 1, positional group. But there's some stats in 2021 versus 2020. So the Steelers had 5 more forced fumbles in 21, 18 versus 13. They had less quarterback hits. Hang on, let me pull it up. Sacks. They had 55 sacks this year versus 56 last year, which is interesting when we had an all extra game. But then you saw how often TJ was out. There was no Tuitt on the team. Although I still thought they should have had more sacks this year. They had 80 pass defenses this year versus 84. 80 this year versus 84 in 2020, which we talked about. 106 quarterback hits this year versus 137 last year, right? 94 tackles for a loss this year versus 103 last year. They scored 0 defensive touchdowns this year versus 3 last year.
Really?
And the average age was 26.1 versus 26.3. Now, all those stats are pretty much a drop, which means that the Steelers were pretty efficient, right? When you think about what someone like when we start talking TJ and his numbers. But with an extra game, the Steelers defense did not perform. Now, obviously, we saw weakness in the defensive, Tuitt's gone. We saw weakness in the defensive tackle position. Noah Alawalu, he I think had 5 or 6 sacks last year and had a career year. The inside linebacker play was poor. For me, in 2022, the numbers can't be lower than the previous year. You got 17 games. You got to play well. You got to get guys back. You've got Brian Flores there. You've now got Terrell Austin promoted. You've got Mike Tomlin in there. 17 games. This can't happen again. If the stats are worse in 17 games in terms of, and I'm not talking about, you let in this many number of yards. I'm talking about hits, sacks, defense, quarterback knockdowns, quarterback hits, defensive touchdowns, tackles for a loss. They're all things you can get more of in a good way with an extra game. That has to change. But with that, Mark, tell me why the outside linebacker unit, it's hard. Obviously, TJ's defensive player of the year, but
it's TJ, mate. TJ is the soul of our team, really. And we need to put pieces around him so he's doing all the work. However, can we get someone like you said to cover and make that splash play when TJ goes up and knocks the ball in the air and someone picks it off, or that sack and there's a bit more coverage, or they throw a duck egg ball and the next minute we get a pick. We need that pressure where TJ puts him in a position where he'll make a sack and next minute it's 3rd and 15. And this is another one I keep bringing up. Look, if you guys don't like me bringing it up, please let me know in the comments. We cannot stop 3rd and 15s. I've never seen this team in the last 5 years that we just go 3rd and 12. We play so well, and then they just let them down the field and get first downs. They can't get off the field on 3rd down. It has been happening the last 5 years. It's a mentality thing. It's TJ getting after it, getting a sack, and then the cornerbacks play laissez, and next minute they get a first down, and you're like, okay, I have to do it again. So TJ, they're number one. They're number one defense for a reason. Alex Highsmith is starting to, help out a little bit too. Guys behind those two guys are just guys. They're just guys that fill in for certain downs where you need TJ to have a rest. Like I said before, if we're talking about wasting talent, like a lot of fans like to say we waste talent over the years, this is one I would actually agree with. The other ones I don't agree with too much because I guess you've got to go out there and win championships, but you are wasting a generational talent in TJ Watt if you don't give this man or give this guy a chance. And yes, he's going to play well in the playoffs too. You have to win a playoff game. This is the moment now. Yeah. You have to. You just have to, Matty. How can you not have this player that does 22.5 sacks? He's doing everything he can. He's batting the ball down 7 times. He's being a wrecking machine. It's like he's sometimes playing like those high school footballers or college footballers, but he just can't. He can't play the whole game this way. He needs someone else to step up, a middle linebacker to do something to help him out. Scheme-wise, get Minka involved too. It's not just like, play, cover 3 or cover 4 or whatever, and then just send Watt and see what happens. That works, but we need some more things. We need to be creative, and we need to put pressure on these quarterbacks and these teams and make them fear. They don't fear us anymore, Matty. They don't fear us. They fear Watt, but they don't fear the Steelers. Do they?
That's it. You hit the nail on the head. So I've got a couple of stats. I mean, I've always got a stat on me, but I've got one stat that I think you're going to really like, Mark. Right? I think you're going to go wow at. Right? But so the first, and it isn't this one. I'll give you the pre-warning. So TJ Watt 52 pressures this year. The Steelers had 175. So he's accounting well over 25% of that, or almost 30%. He had 13 quarterback knockdowns and 15 quarterback hurries. But here's the golden stat, right? Here's the golden stat. He had 22.5 sacks, right? More like 23 over 23, right? He had 22.5 sacks recorded statistically on only 45 blitz plays. That means every 2 blitz plays, TJ Watt gets a sack. Right? That's pretty incredible.
Hang on a minute. Can you say that number again? 22 what?
So he had 40. He according to Pro Football Reference, and I go off them, not PFF, he played on 45 blitz plays, right? And he had 22.5 sacks. So every 2 blitz plays that he does, he gets a sack.
So during those, every time they blitz, I guess he got the sack, right? Is that what you're saying?
Every second time they blitzed.
Right.
Now, obviously he got sacks on non-blitz plays, but right. But on actual blitz plays, yeah.
Well, and we don't blitz anymore. I don't think, from what I've seen from my NFL knowledge.
And for context, Alex Highsmith was on 63 blitz plays and got 6 sacks. So
we don't even sometimes in watching the defense now compared to years past, we don't even like have the presence to look like we're going to blitz. We just line up in that, the formation of the linebacker sitting back and wait. Like we are just so reactive, not proactive.
Yeah,
in this defense, and it's hard to see. It's really hard to see because you're versing such great talent with some of these tight ends and receivers, and like I said, they're burning us. So that's crazy. Like you miss the guy like Dick LeBeau, who's going to be a Hall of Fame coach, and you get look at those certain defenses where they were moving all around and they would show. Remember Troy talking about it. Troy was saying they would show different coverages and they would at the last second move out of it. All the players were talking together. It just feels like all these players, hey TJ, you got it, mate. Okay, all right, sick. And then that's all they got, right? But they might just be looking at the play sheet and going, well, I have to be here. You got to start to read the game better, I think. Like, there needs to be a big change, Matty. Something needs to happen. I want to see some defense yet again, man. I want to see some below 20 points because we don't know who our quarterback's going to be, right? And we need help. Whoever the quarterback is, the defense needs to stand up, and it can't be all TJ.
That's it. That's 100% it. And that's a good segue, Mark. We've got like 3 minutes left. Everything we've talked about, all the stats, all the positions, how do the Steelers get better? Like, which position, it does, even if, obviously some of these positions had injuries, what have you. Right now, you're sitting here today, we've talked about the top 6 positional rankings. You can give me 2 options, but which position needs addressing the most in this offseason?
I'd like to see, I don't know who this guy is. Is it Devin Lloyd?
Devin Lloyd, the linebacker out of Utah.
Yeah, bring him in.
That guy, man. Number 20. Everyone wants Tyler Linderbaum. I take Devin Lloyd over Linderbaum.
Why?
People can call me nuts, but I pick Devin Lloyd every time.
I know a little bit about him, and I want to do some more research and watch more highlights, stuff like that. But why not bring in another Devin? And we need a spark. Like you look at the Cowboys with Micah Parsons, what they did for him, what he did for them. He got Rookie of the Year, and he's a crazy, crazy guy flying around the field. Yes, we need to go O-line. Yes, we need to go to quarterback. But why not address the defense and play Steeler football? I miss Steeler football, Matty. I really do. I know they can't hit as hard as Debo anymore, but why not bring in a young guy at middle linebacker and shore that up? And then you have the projection of Devin Lloyd going, could he be great? And then Devin Bush be like, I want to be great. I can get better. You can build around that. Can you not build around that?
100%. Of course you can.
All right.
Or you get the guy that Shannon and I are high on, Chad Moomer, and probably not even the 3rd round now. He's probably going to be he could be a late 2nd round pick. But I love Devin Lloyd as well. As I say, if you're not going to trade around, trade back, I just think Devin Lloyd at 20 if he's sitting there.
One question, Matty. Why did we bring in Flores and all these kind of guys? Will we go defense in the 1st round?
Mate, if you look at just an example, Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 right now. You look at a lot of people's top 50, top 75 players. There's 20 to 30 outside linebackers in 3-4 or defensive ends. There's some great depth at that position. Not so much interior defensive line, but there's some great depth of that. Yeah, I just think, to me, it's cornerback. It's still cornerback only because they need 2 or 3 guys there. I think we're one. Yeah, we need a couple. We need a thumper, but we don't know what we've got in Buddy Johnson. We need one top inside linebacker or middle linebacker, whatever you want to call them. But to me, we need 2 or 3. And obviously, we've got guys we don't have, Hayden's off contract, what have you. We need at minimum 2 new cornerbacks on this team. So they're very equal for me, and I think the linebacker may have a bigger impact than the top cornerback does. But they have you can't allow this stuff because Ben couldn't catch these numbers up. Mason ain't catching these numbers up, and you're going to allow almost 4,000 yards on passing. You're going to allow over 17 games, let's say, hopefully only 12 or 1,300 yards rushing. That's 5,500 yards. That's nuts. You cannot allow 3,500 or more yards in the passing game. You cannot allow a completion rate of 63%, and you cannot allow a quarterback rating over 80. It's just not on.
Can't allow 140 yards a game rushing. I'm sorry, you can't.
But with that, let's get her up. Mark and I have said all that needs to be said. You've got the big pause there. Thank you very much for listening, as always. Steelers touch down under. Listeners, Mark, as always.
Go Steelers.